Okay, I'm going to start right now, guys. Okay, hello, good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, Embracing the Cloud with Confidence, brought to you today by Symantec. My name is Liz Glom, and I am the Marketing Manager for eSchool News, and I will also be your host today. Today's speaker is Renault Ross. He's Symantec's U.S. Information Security and Privacy Architect. Before I pass things off to Renault, I would like to mention a few quick things. If you have any questions during the presentation, please post them in the Q&A panel on the lower right-hand side of the screen, and we will make sure to cover as many of them as we can as the time allows. Also, please be on the lookout for a follow-up email. You should get this within 24 hours of the webinar finishing. It will contain a copy of the slides and a link to the archive webinar for your review or for you to share. So without further ado, I'd like to pass things off to Mr. Ross here.
Well, thank you, Liz, and I want to thank everyone for joining. So good morning, good afternoon, and today's presentation, as Liz mentioned, is all around embracing the cloud with confidence. And as e-learning institutions look to offload their services to CSPs, so cloud service providers, what does that mean from a security perspective? So the agenda I've prepared is pretty straightforward. There are four key areas that I want to talk through. And so before getting into the sweet spot, if you will, so the strategies around securing and managing your services, then offload it to the cloud, I want to spend some time talking through what we're seeing as the key trends outside of cloud, virtualization, and mobility. And also, I want to share a quick snapshot of today's threat landscape, which is rapidly changing. And I'll spend a little time talking through some of the e-learning security challenges, and then we'll spend the bulk of the time talking through strategies for cloud. So if that's a private cloud and e-learning institution is setting up, or if there's a public cloud or a hybrid, which is a combination of both. And also talk through some no-cost value-added assessment services from Symantec and or our partners. And so with that, again, Renault Ross, and I work as the Security and Privacy Architect for Symantec, and I like to refer to my role as a kind of a catch-all bucket, because not only do I work with the education customers, but I'm also working with state customers as well as federal customers around what does cybersecurity mean as they look to develop and build their security programs. And so if we look at the trends, and so first let's start with this thing called consumerization. So Liz goes to Best Buy and buys a device that she knows she loves and she likes, and she wants to bring that device on campus or within some institution. And what does that mean in terms of being able to ensure that only the business data is removed when Liz is no longer part of that institution, or copyright information. So this is the whole BYOD, and I'll talk through some security challenges. Also, I'll talk through some recommendations as well as you look at those types of trends. And the second is cloud. And if I had a quarter for every time I've heard the word cloud, I could probably put my kids through college. But again, if it's a private cloud or public cloud, what does that mean in terms of ensuring that the right set of controls and strategies are in place? And we'll spend the bulk of the time talking through that. And so one thing I'll note is that organizations may offload their cloud services to a CSP, a cloud service provider, so they may lose manageability, but note that you still have to maintain accountability, and accountability as it relates to the external mandates. So FERPA, if the Federal Education Privacy Rights Act, or a PCI, or any of the other external mandates. And then a threat landscape. Wow, the bad guys are monetizing their skill sets to steal sensitive information and having controls in place. Again, so if it's a CSP or if it's on-premise. And I think we all can agree that virtualization, either moving your x86 machines or virtualization of storage, and also e-learning institutions are looking at application virtualization. So I have a browser that's tied to an application. I have to do an upgrade, but now I have the ability to virtualize maybe an older, newer browser rather, and move forward with the implementation. And then ITification. So if you can guess what this is, I got a free Norton Internet security card I can send out to you. But if you think about ITification, in the 90s, individuals had one, maybe two devices. But today I have an iOS device, I have an Android device, I have a Windows device. So what does that mean from a management standpoint in terms of getting your arms around those devices and having some visibility within the organization? And then the last trend is data growth. And I read a report that roughly 70% of files that are created are rarely revisited. So again, having controls in place to drive up the storage utilization and move unused data from Tier 1 to Tier 2 to archive and backup. So just looking at those key trends. And there's another trend that should be on here, and the question mark points to data mining, or big data, if you've heard of that. So how to make sense of all of this information that's out there and to make sense of that and pull that information and correlate that to look for abnormal behavior within the e-learning institution. So again, I just wanted to paint what we're seeing from Symantec in terms of some of the key trends outside of cloud, which we'll talk through, consumerization and BYOD. I was actually speaking to a group of executives not too long ago, and I said, well, you guys, what's your BYOD strategy? And the executive looks at me, he says, well, bring your own disaster, because that's what it is if you don't have a strategy in place. And mobile device management is not a strategy. MDM is a product. But again, I'll touch on a strategy as we move forward within the presentation. So the threat landscape, just to paint the picture here. So if you look at the fundamental shift, and I can remember back when I was a security practitioner building security programs a decade ago or so, it was all about hacking. So if I hack, Liz's system, guess what? I own her system. But quickly the malicious adversary, if you will, realized that, hey, there's some financial gain if I were to access her system, right? Maybe I can scan her system for personal identifiable information or electronic personal health information, or you name it. And on to cyber espionage. So if you're familiar with the Mandiant report, and I definitely would recommend you go out and review and download and review that report, but it talks through an organized gang in China that is basically launching advanced persistent threats against the U.S. So still in our intellectual property, so a great report. And then the last area is cyber warfare. So again, if you're familiar with a piece of malcode that found itself on an Iranian SCADA system, Stuxnet, with the intent to do harm, you may want to read up on that as well. So again, just wanted to talk through the fundamental shift in the threat landscape from hacking to cyber warfare. So let's look at it this way. Your information is worth money, and I wanted to put this up here as a backdrop to see what credit card information is going for. And this was pulled from what we call our Internet Security Threat Report that we release each year. So again, from 30 cents to $100, and in particular, if it's a foreign credit card, it's going for much more. Bank account credentials. Again, if it's a business bank account, guess what? Show me the money. That's going to go for a higher amount. So it's all about information. So as you think through your cloud strategy, think about protecting the information. I mean, it's important to close the vulnerabilities within the systems, but it's all around protecting the information. And so my strategy that I'll talk through will correlate with an information protection strategy. And Hackers for Hire, I saw this PowerPoint, and I wanted to make this available because these guys, again, not only are they monetizing their skill sets, right, but they're also charging, providing support. So yeah, you can buy support from a malicious actor now for their toolkit that they've created. So if you go online and do a few Google searches, you'll find that they'll communicate via an IRC, an Internet Relay Chat, if you're looking to download a toolkit. So you don't have to be a malicious actor. I mean, you don't have to have the skill set, but now you can buy those toolkits along with support. And one thing I want to talk through is if you look at some of the targeted attacks, they're up 42%. And so a targeted attack is that instead of sending spam, actually the spam rates have gone down. What I'll do is, and Liz, sorry to pick on you, but Liz decided to go to Best Buy, and she bought a iDevice or an Android device. Well, now I have a profile of Liz, and perhaps I send an email to Liz with a catchy subject line to say, hey, Liz, hey, did you realize you had a 20% rebate when you bought the iDevice? So now what I've done is I've created a more personalized email for Liz because Liz works for a super secret company, and I want to infiltrate Liz's account and machine to access that network. So what we're seeing is that these attacks now are more targeted. And if you look at the targeted attacks by industry, the manufacturing industry is leading that with 24%. And what the malicious actors are doing is instead of going to attack, say, a Bank of America, well, maybe I will attack a business partner of Bank of America, a smaller company, right? They may not have all of the safeguards in place, and then I'll leapfrog through that to the larger entity. So manufacturing and government forth. So again, I just wanted to provide a little background on the trends and what we're seeing from Symantec. And then the last area is talk through the how. And so spear phishing and watering hole attacks, those are the two main attacks. And so spear phishing, again, I talked about the example with Liz, but again, I am looking for an individual person that may have some type of influence or role within the organization to attack their machines. And then the second is watering hole attack. And what this is that I don't have to directly attack Liz's machine. Perhaps I profile some of the sites that she would visit. And so what I do is I launch what is referred to as a shotgun attack against all the websites that she would visit. And I plant malcode on those websites. And just to give you guys a new tech word, it's called malvertising. So basically 61% of legitimate websites have malcode on them because the bad guys, they essentially renting space on those sites. And so when you connect to those sites, you're actually being redirected to a malicious person's site, either some type of JavaScript or HTML. And if you think about the vulnerability is Microsoft is doing a great job of patching their operating systems. Every second Tuesday, that's when I would have my wings when I was a security engineer because, I figured I was going to spend a lot of time patching machines. But the malicious actors are actually going after, if you look at the host IPS, that will protect the traditional, layer, 80 HTTP and network, but the malicious actors are actually going after the plugins. So Flash, Acrobat, those particular applications. So as you think through your patch management strategies, it's important to take those up to those third-party plugins. And I have an example I wanted to show. So let's just say the person on the left, this is a student, right? And, John Doe at learninginstitution.edu receives an email from someone they believe that they know within the organization. And so the vulnerability isn't in the Microsoft Excel spreadsheet, as I mentioned, second Tuesdays I would have my wings, but it's actually in a Flash object that Excel is calling a browser plugin. And from there, I'm able to now download the malicious software to the individual's machine. So that's one example. There's another example. I think we've all received an email from someone saying, "Hey, click on this link," and clicking on that link redirects the person over to the malicious person's website. And if you were to just rest your mouse over the URL, in many cases, it will show you where it's being redirected to. And in many cases, it'll list just the IP address instead of the DNS, the domain name. So that's one example. Second example. And then the third is that, and I mentioned earlier, that you can visit a site and become infected because, again, I've infiltrated that site, and I'm taking advantage of the third-party plugins that you have. So if it's Java or if it's ActiveX, and now I'm able to infect your endpoint. And let's face it, how many mom and pop shops have a full-time IT guy? So again, just wanted to paint the picture of what we're seeing from Symantec with the threat. And then if you look at the mobile devices, and I don't know how many times you've heard, I have a son of which half of him lives in the refrigerator, but he just finished an intern with Google, and the kid can do everything except clean his room, but there's an app for that, right? So there is an app out, it's pretty cool. It allows a student or person, if you will, to text while they're walking, but what it does is it turns their screen into a dashboard so that they can see, a windshield rather. And so great application for teenagers, right, to see where you're going. But the only problem with that is that there's an application for fee, and then there's an application for free. And the problem with the for free is that it was found on a third-party site, and it was self-signed. So self-signed meaning that there's no what they call a public key infrastructure saying that I vouch for this particular application. And so what it does is it does two things. One is it sends information back to the malicious actor, the IME, the manufacturer equipment identifier number, and the phone number. And the other thing it does is it sends information to everyone that's on that person's contact list. Hey, check this out. I just downloaded this cool app for $1. So again, it infiltrates that mobile device and sends information back to the malicious person and information to folks that are on the contact list. And so why? So one is, if you look at the Google OS and then the iOS, it's the patch management strategy. One is that it's an open platform. The second is, if you look at iOS, when they release patches, it's a direct download. Well, with Android, first they have to go through the manufacturers. That could be any of the manufacturers that are approved to sell those devices. And then the second is the service providers, right? The AT&Ts, the Verizon, and then now the patch is available. And so why is it hard to stop attacks in general? And the first is, if I'm a malicious actor, I create a payload. And then what I do is I obfuscate that payload, because traditional antivirus is a one-to-one mapping, right? So if I obfuscate that download or that payload, if you will, I can create different variants of that payload. And not only that, but the malicious actors, what they're doing is they'll scan the payload against a cloud scanner to see if there's a detection signature out there. So one thing that I would like to leave is that when you think through traditional antivirus, which is needed, but looking at protection schemes for behavior-based detection and reputation-based detection as well to complement those controls. And so I think we've all seen this screen here in that fact, right? And I was on a flight not too long ago, and someone told me, I'm safe. I got a Max against viruses, you know? And so, and I said, well, let me send you some content, because in fact, last year we found that over 600,000 Macs were infected from one threat. So definitely recommend that, you know, organizations take their controls serious when it comes to protecting Macs outside of the Windows operating system. Okay. And so, again, I quickly went over the Internet Security Threat Report. I could spend a couple of hours going through it in detail, but I did want to make this available to the audience. So if you want to learn more regarding, you know, some of the attacks, some of the methods, please research and download the Internet Security Threat Report from Symantec. We release this once a year. Okay, so now let's talk through the sweet spot here. And so won't spend a lot of time here, but, you know, let's face it, the business drivers with e-learning is, you know, it's all about being connected, you know, anytime, anywhere. And also organizations, again, they have to address those external mandates, you know, from the FERPAs, you know, to the PCIs, and cost savings. So I talked about virtualization and cloud services, and, you know, and it's one of those things that makes sense to, you know, offload services to cloud providers. But again, the institution still have to, you know, show accountability and assessment that they're compliant for both state as well as federal funding. And so when you look at some of the challenges, right, you know, security is one. Obviously, I was on a panel not too long ago, and someone asked me, you know, Mr. Symantec, you know, how do you prioritize the data you send to the cloud? And I took out my wallet and I said, well, you know, I got some 1s, some 5s, and 10s, and I usually hide the Ben Franklin because my daughter, she'll go straight forward. So if you think about your information, you can approach it with a similar strategy, in that, you know, there's some low-hanging fruit. So if you think about, you know, what, you know, Microsoft provides with Office 365 for email, or if you think about hosting your backup in the cloud, so those are some low-hanging fruit. But, you know, sensitive information and our data, organizations are looking at housing that information with either CSPs that can produce compliance reports that they're meeting those external mandates, or they're leveraging controls internal to wrap a layer of security around that type of information, from controls to obfuscate information such as encryption or data loss prevention. And again, I'll touch on a more broader strategy as it relates to a cloud service provider as well as an on-premise cloud solution. And then manageability. You know, let's face it, you know, you can't secure what you don't know about. So you need to understand if it's patch management, if it's software delivery, what's in the environment before you can secure it. And then the last is, you know, security is availability. And, you know, I would argue that availability is security, because, you know, what good is it to have a databases and learning management systems that are highly available, but you don't really know the integrity of those systems from a risk standpoint. So again, all of those go hand in hand. And if you look at some of the challenges, I think it's spread over security management and availability. So where to start with cloud enablement? So let me populate this cloud, this PowerPoint, and I'll talk through it. So you look at your campus systems. Okay, maybe they're managed from, we'll say, you know, some type of, you know, internal IT department. Okay? And then you look at the mobile devices and the student systems, as I populate the slide, and those potentially could have CSPs for, you know, e-learning apps as well as mobile content providers, and then student tablets and mobile phones and other endpoints. So it can get pretty messy when you think about where your information is. And so when you look at your strategy for, you know, cloud enablement, the first thing I do in conversations and sessions that I have with IT leaders is I said, well, first of all, let's look at your end state. Where is it that you're trying to go? What are your project initiatives, requirements, mandates? And let's develop and ensure that there's some type of governance, either an internal policy team or someone that owns and mandates governance and monitors compliance. And so this could be from, again, I use the external mandates, the FERPAs, as well as the PCIs. But what about internal stuff? Student must have a baseline of some type of AV on their machine or patch management. That could be a baseline or a standard. It must be at least 2 or 3 days, current. So again, this is the framework. And the second is making it hard for folks to get into systems. And so I'll use the example. So if you're using say a CSP, a cloud service provider for your learning management system, and it stores sensitive information, and there's policies in place that state that there should be strong authentication outside of your single one, form factor authentication, which is your username and password. And that could be something that person knows, such as the username and password, but something they have, such as they have a smart device and there's a random 6-digit PIN that changes every 30 seconds. And in tandem, they have to type in their user credentials as well as that PIN. And so what that does is it adds a second layer of protection. That's one way of looking at it. The second is, how do you know that you're actually connected to the cloud service provider? If I'm a bad guy, I can launch what's called a man-in-the-middle attack. So essentially, I unencrypt that traffic, I read that information, and I re-encrypt that traffic, and I send it on to the cloud service provider. So where I'm going there, that's with some type of certificate management. I think we've all experienced the warning dialogue going to a site and stating that, this certificate may not match this site. And so based on what it's saying is that, hey, I can't trust that you're going to that right site. So if organizations are looking at building their internal cloud, I definitely recommend that they leverage the managed public key infrastructures to validate that the connection is a legitimate connection. So that would be your VeriSign, if you're familiar with the Symantec capabilities, as well as GoDaddy and other types of managed PKI infrastructures. And then the second is protecting the information. So you have policy in place to state that, Liz is, who she claims to be, and I'm making it hard for her to authenticate to the machine because she's part of the secret super users group, so she has to do two-factor authentication. But what if, Liz decides to, leave the organization or leave with personal information, personal identifiable information? So this is all about preventing the exfiltration of sensitive data. And let's face it, if a bad guy or someone is looking to infiltrate a system, it's only a matter of time. So you have to have controls in place to prevent that information from leaving a trusted network, and then also having controls in place to obfuscate information such as encryption. And then the fourth area is being able to manage. So I talked about the vulnerability earlier, that the threats are moving from the operating system to the browser. And so these types of controls would reduce the risk and ensure that the appropriate patches are in place for the Adobe or Java or you name it, third-party applications. And then the last is protecting the infrastructure and or cloud. So again, this would be the defense in depth with your malware protection at the endpoint, and protection if it's web traffic or if it's email. So again, this is a high-level strategy to protect information, and again, if it's hosted with a cloud service provider or internal. And so what I want to do is I want to spend a little time and I'll talk through each area, and then I'll map that back to capabilities that either the institution should have, in place, or the questions that the institution should be asking the cloud service provider if that company is hosting their services. So first is, the governance tools and development policies. And so if you look at, some of the requirements, and I talked about those earlier. We talked about FERPA and PCI, and I was just in a conversation with a IT director not too long ago, and around what they're doing for PCI outside of segmenting the network. But you look at other controls, the Children's Internet Protection Act, and I think that's probably more relevant in K-12, but the Higher Education Opportunity Act that states that, for you to receive federal funding, you have to have controls in place to integrate copyright information that is not leaving a trusted network. So this is ensuring that your governance framework is in place, because, again, not having those controls in place, that'll affect the revenue coming in for the institution. So if you look at these types of controls, one is it allows the organization to have policy created on demand. And so the example I give is we have a tool that creates policy, and I would say the biggest competitor to that tool is Microsoft Excel, because a lot of institutions, what they're doing is they have these manual processes in place instead of leveraging tools that already have, say, a FERPA policy created. And when there's a change to FERPA or an update to PCI or an update to the Higher Education Opportunity Act, these policies are automatically updated. And not only that, but typically for policy creation, there are stakeholders within the institution. It's not only IT, but you have someone on the other side that have to sign off to state that, hey, I am the data owner. If you think about IT, we're just making it, the services available, with technology. But again, this allows an organization to create that policy on demand, to socialize that policy with some of the stakeholders, and then sign off on it. Now, once that policy is signed off on, now what I can do is I can scan and assess endpoints to ensure that they're compliant. So if FERPA states that, hey, there should be some type of confidentiality control, so preventing information from unauthorized users or availability controls for an asset, guess what? I can scan that information and say, this asset is compliant with FERPA or PCI because it has the features enabled to ensure that that's happening. So again, that would be for governance, risk, and compliance, a toolkit that organizations could leverage. And then the second is authenticating identities and devices. So you have policies in place, and making it hard for someone to access a system with personal identifiable information, a learning management system. So again, if the cloud service provider is hosting the service, or if it's a local service, again, you can invoke, two-factor authentication. So that student or faculty has to type their credentials, that could be their Active Directory credentials, as well as a PIN that changes every 30 seconds rather, to access that service itself. And so when you look at the types of capabilities and tool sets, the first is and I won't talk product, but I'll just state, VeriSign identity protection. And if you can see to the left, there's a phone and there's a 6-digit number that will change every 30 seconds. So that's what is referred to as a soft token. And the good thing here is that any student and faculty could go out and download this soft token, and now that provides another form factor, or it could be a hard token. And then the second area is the public key infrastructure. So I talked through the example earlier that how do you know that you're connecting to the legitimate CSP, cloud service provider, or portal or website that you have internal. And so again, this would be leveraging a public key infrastructure on the back end to ensure that that's a legitimate cert. Fraud detection, this is primarily for the financial services, but this states that, Liz logged in from an IE browser one day, and the other day she logged in from Safari or another browser. And so the combination of those different form factors allows me now to create a policy violation. Also, when you think about authenticating identities and devices, the other area which is key is now being able to enable any user, any device, to access if it's a private cloud and public cloud. And so gateway technology, what that does is it states that regardless of the device, I have policies in place that provide access control. And so basically what I've done is I've uploaded the role-based access control that I have, say, within an Active Directory to a appliance, essentially, that allows me now to force authentication from that user for their local Active Directory credentials. And again, I could do two-factor authentication. And also, I can protect that information as well. So I use the example of Dropbox, right? Some organizations are using Dropbox to share information. But the problem with Dropbox is, how can I obfuscate or encrypt that information if I'm sending that information to a person? There aren't any security controls around that. What if there's personal identifiable information that I don't want uploaded to Dropbox? So with this type of capability, it would allow an organization to extend whatever internal policies they have external to the CSP and wrap controls around it. So basically, it states that, and Lisa, I hate to use you in the example again, but since Lisa is part of the secret super users group, anything that Lisa uploads to Dropbox and decides to share with anyone, I want you to automatically encrypt that information on the fly. Or since Lisa is part of the secret super users group, I want to prevent Lisa from downloading anything from Dropbox or uploading anything from Dropbox. So again, this is a technology that we're talking to customers about in terms of how to build out that trusted framework from the end user to the private cloud or public cloud. And to spend a little bit more time on it, the two areas, one is what is called Intelligence Center. So this, again, allows me now to go in and create that policy. Lisa is part of the secret super users group. I would create that there. The second is the gateway. If you think about it, is acting as a proxy. So before that student would access, say, their learning management system or Office 367 or anything that's hosted in the cloud or anything that's web-based, so that could be even internal. So what I can do now is I can challenge that user because they're forced to go through my gateway. And the value this brings is that regardless of the device that the student or faculty is using, now I have a layer of protection between the service and the end user. The other area is mobile device management, so BYOD, and I talked about BYOD earlier, bring your own disaster, but if you think about mobile device management is a product that will remote inventory, but it's not protecting the information on the device itself. And so as organizations think through their BYOD strategy, I strongly encourage organizations to look at not only MDM, but look at mobile application management. And mobile application management does a few things. I have a slide that talks through it. But what that does is that regardless of the device that the user owns, if I have to align with the Higher Education Opportunity Act, and I need to basically remove data and or apps from a device. What I do is I create my policy around the application versus creating policy around the device. So what that means is that when that person is no longer part of that curriculum or no longer part of the e-learning institution, I can remove the application and the data that's associated with the application. And the other value is that, say I have to align with purple. I have to ensure that there's strong confidentiality controls, and I have to encrypt information on that device. Well, since I know that what the e-learning or the learning management application is, the data that's associated with that device, I can invoke encryption of that data. So now what I'm doing is I'm protecting the information. So earlier I talked through whatever strategy you're looking to, if it's offloading to a CSP or if it's creating your internal cloud, think about the strategy around protecting the information itself. So again, MDM will be one part of the strategy. The other area would be mobile device management, and there were a couple other areas that I didn't talk on, but you still need to have the traditional threat management capabilities in place, and that will be your traditional antivirus and as well as some of the behavior-based technologies outside of antivirus as well. And so the third area, so just to recap, either the CSP or on-prem solution, you have your policy framework in place, so you can not only trust that you're doing the right thing, but you can verify if it's for E-rate funding or if it's for some type of external mandates. You made it hard for folks to get to your sensitive systems. You have controls in place to validate that that system is that system and or connecting to the CSP. And now you have you're looking at where you can protect the information. And so this is all around how do I prevent stuff from leaving? Again, leaving my institution or leaving the CSP environment. And so the first is this the use case. Obviously, you have your security breaches and needing to have controls in place to provide a layer of confidentiality. But data loss prevention, that's the first area that I would definitely recommend. And there are three phases to DLP. And what DLP does is it says that based off of policy that you set up, that information doesn't leave. So this could be student information, it could be SSN, the social security number, or it could be credit card number. You name it, anything that you deem sensitive, right? And so there are three different areas. One is at your network. So any area that's egress, that's leaving the network, basically having this software in place, the software that's installed on the server essentially, and all it's doing is it's integrating the traffic, and it's saying that, hey, based off of policy, should I block, log, and or alert? Or perhaps you just don't realize that this is sensitive information and you're breaking policy, so I want to basically flag this back to a corporate policy that I have or campus policy that I have set up. At the endpoint, the endpoint is the student or faculty decides to take their laptop home, and it's a control that basically provides that same level of protection. So if I'm attempting to copy something confidential to a USB or CD or DVD, or send it to my Gmail account or email, I'm able to block, log, and alert. And not only that, but when I bring that endpoint back on campus, now all of that information is fed back up to some central management console for reporting. And then storage. Storage is the other area that if I need to crawl the network and identify where PII is, so personal identifiable information. So if it's on the SQL backends or Oracle systems or file servers, you name it, essentially having controls in place to do that. And not only that, but if it's sensitive, being able to have that control, move that sensitive information into a more secure location and wrap a layer of encryption around it. So again, DLP will be the first for protecting the exfiltration of information. And then the second would be obviously encryption. And what encryption does is it's going to obfuscate that information. And the one thing that I would throw out is that if organizations are looking at encrypting information, I would definitely recommend a strategy around key management, because HIPAA actually states, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, that if an organization isn't doing appropriate key management, it's like not doing encryption at all. And the example I like to use is it's like, Renault decides to go out to the park and I lock my door and I leave my key in the door. Well, I've locked my door and my key was in the door. So, the malicious actor could have that key. So I would definitely recommend ensuring that there's a strategy around key management. And then file sharing applications in the cloud too. So I used the example of Dropbox earlier and being able to have a gateway in place and invoking controls to add more protection around Dropbox. But other capabilities that organizations can look at is an application that basically allows Dropbox-like types of controls, but a little bit more security around it. So let me give you the example. The example is you share information with someone else, but now that information is encrypted on demand when you share that information. Or you need to ensure that that information is scanned for malware automatically. So this is a file sharing application that organizations are looking at. And again, I didn't want this to be a feature functionality, the discussion, but it's a solution called Norton Zone, if you're familiar with that, and I think it's free for up to, I want to say, 3 gig or so for the home user, but there's an enterprise solution as well. And then the last area is when you think about protecting information, and I mentioned earlier, security is availability, and availability is security. Having controls in place, either if the CSP can, produce, these types of controls and verify and acknowledge that, not only are they backing up your information, but hey, the information is highly available. Or if you're hosting your local CSP, and so obviously controls in place that would scale over multiple, operating systems outside of your traditional, Windows and AIX and HP systems, and ensure that, that information is deduped and is archived and stored away. And then the fourth area is protecting the infrastructure. So recap, you have policy, you're making it hard for the student to get to personal information. You got controls in place to prevent bad stuff from leaving. You've obfuscated the stuff that's on premise. Now, let's look at taking care of home. Again, CSP or on-prem. And protecting the infrastructure is all about getting visibility and closing the vulnerabilities within the infrastructure. And so if you think about it this way, it really becomes your virtual command center. So you're using, SCCM or using Alterius, these are controls that provide, some type of patch management. And again, stretching patch management from the operating system to the plug-in, or being able to integrate with power management. And so what that is if you want to, lower costs and automatically, shedding off, computers at a certain time to lower power consumption, as well as your traditional help desk management, your ticketing and software delivery. And then the last area, so protecting the infrastructure. And again, I'll mention on-prem if you're hosting this, or the cloud service provider. And one thing I want to mention is that when you decide to leverage the CSPs, that should be a conversation between, someone in legal and security, because you have to make sure the right language is in the contract, that the CSP will produce a FAST-70 Type 2 audit, and it will align with whatever internal policies that you all have. And then, again, so the last area is protecting the infrastructure. And so for malicious, activity and being able to identify abnormal behavior. And so this is really the defense in depth here of that. So something at the endpoint, so that's going to be the malware and the behavior-based detection. Also, your messaging, the email, SMTP traffic, and being able to block unwanted or inappropriate, content from coming in. And then last is the web traffic. And so this really becomes the the gates, if you will, to increase the work factor of a malicious process and or person getting to the endpoint. Okay, so that was a lot of information I shared with you all. Just kind of wanted to, one, paint a picture, from Symantec, what we were seeing, with the trends. Two, tie that into some of the threat landscape discussion, and then three, a high-level strategy of, cloud service providers, some questions you should ask, as well as if you're looking at hosting your own cloud. But where did you start? So where to start? So Symantec, we're working with a partner. So basically, we've created what's called the e-learning operational readiness assessment, and it's a no-cost value-added assessment. And so essentially what we do is we come in, we look at your policies, we look at the types of controls that you have in place to meet those policies, and where you are with your security program. So if it's a vulnerability management program, which is simply patch management, antivirus, if it's an incident response for malware detection, or if it's business continuity. And from there, we write a recommended executive summary and strategy to further leverage IT capabilities to address whatever your requirements are. And so again, this is a no-cost value-added assessment. So if anyone's interested in that, Brady is on from education, as well as someone you can email me as well. And my contact info is Renault_Ross at Symantec.com. So that's all I have, and I'll see if there are any questions. And Liz, if I
so Renault, I did send you a bunch, but I can read them for you because it might be easier for me to get them.
Okay. And if I don't get to all the questions, I can definitely email the attendees. But what do you have?
First one is, what is about the average amount lost to attacks per victim?
Okay. So based off of our Internet Security Threat Report that we released, 600,000 identities were exposed per attack, and roughly about 71 million folks were victims of cybercrime last year.
Okay, a really good one just came in. It says, are there policies that cover protecting teacher P2 data? We get pushback that teacher and principal data should be public, so why bother securing it?
Yes, there are policies, and a lot of those policies would align with if it's FERPA, as well as if they have to align with the Higher Education Opportunity Act. But yeah, there are policies in place that state that information should be protected.
Okay. What would be the motivation for people to steal student assessment scores, grades, etc.?
It's all about integrity. If you think about it, if I compromise, we'll say a UNC system, and I go in and I modify grades, what does that say for the reputation of that entity, right? So that will be one. And then the other area is that a lot of the malicious actors, what they're doing is they use those systems as a jump-off point. So if I decide to attack someone in a different country, basically what I do is I can attack say a school and leverage those systems to leapfrog to other systems. So now the traceability ends at the last point of connection.
Okay, someone said, security-wise, how does OCloud compare with Google Drive?
That's a great one. I have to follow up on that one. I don't have any update on that one.
Okay, I will give you that person's name.
Yes.
I hope whoever that person is, I hope you know who you are. You'll get an email.
Yeah, I'll eventually get one. Nice. Go ahead.
I also have, someone says, what about passwords? What is the best practice for this? And how worried should we be if users are using the same password across multiple apps, cloud services, etc.?
Very. Yeah, with passwords, typically you want to have a, special, 7 digits, a special character, passwords, but there are tools in place to ensure that that person is typing in a complex password. The easiest is to use Microsoft's Active Directory, and it forces that user to use a complex password. So that's one issue. The second is also changing that password. And I know some individuals, they use fluffy dog 123, and they use it for their personal as well as their private. But it forces them to change their password, say every 30, every 60, every 90 days. And also, this aligns with a lot of the external policies as well that call for good and appropriate password management strategy.
Okay, someone asked, and I don't know if it's right, they said, what's a TALO or PALO, T-A-L-O or P-A-L-O? They might have heard you say something. Do you know what that is?
What's that? About? I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Liz?
Someone asked, what's a TALO, or T-A-L-O, or P-A-L-O?
P-A-L-O, PALO?
Yeah. Maybe that's wrong.
Shoot me a note on that one.
Okay, last question that has come in. It says FERPA or F-E-R-P-A doesn't cover teachers. What was the other one? Higher Education Policies Act?
Yeah, so I know HEOA, and I can do some additional research. That ties into copyright information for students. So what I'll do is I can research that one, and I can follow up, with some more appropriate policies that would address the teachers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it for questions right now. Oh, wait, one more just came in. We have enough time for that. This is the last one. It says, can you give an example of how to manage passwords for children younger than 10 years old? Is the solution something like one password to remember more complex passwords?
Yeah. So a few things I got, and I want to follow up that person with, with Norton, we actually have what's called Norton Family Protection, and so with that, there are some tools to help manage not only passwords, but some of the sites that they're visiting, and ensuring that there are controls in place to prevent them from going out to bad sites. So, Liz, if you share the information with that particular person, I can actually send them a link to the Norton Family Protection.
Yep, I can do that. And as Renault was so kind, he included his email address. So if you guys have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to email him. So that's it for today. Thank you all for attending, guys. Like I said, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to either email Renault, or you have my email address in the many emails you've probably received about this webinar saying, like, don't forget. I will happily pass it along. Also, as a reminder, you will all receive a follow-up email within 24 hours of today's webinar with a link to the archived webinar, so the recording, and the ability to download the slides. So thank you all again for joining us today, and I hope to see you guys on another webinar, and thank you, Renault.
Yep, thank you, Liz. Thanks, everyone, for joining.